Good afternoon. Welcome back, students. This afternoon, I'm going to share a nonfiction book with you about Abraham Lincoln. The book is called Looking at Lincoln, and it's by Maira, Kalman. And when I sneak peek the cover, I noticed something so different. First of all, this looks like the Lincoln Memorial, but instead of being all white like the memorial is and Lincoln's statue being white, it's all different bright colors. And that's something that's very interesting about this book, I'll tell you ahead of time, is that the illustrations are done in a kind of modern style. You know, a lot of picture book illustrators, when they're doing the pictures, they do use a realistic style. They try to make the pictures look as real as possible. So here, the illustrator was trying to draw pictures of cats and dogs with Lincoln that would look really real. But what's interesting is there's another style of artwork and drawing that's more modern and abstract, where the artist or the illustrator is also trying to kind of give you a message, send another message through the illustrations and the colors they use. So here, the ground or the floor of the memorial is pink, the walls are yellow, and the Lincoln statue, which is white in real life, is blue. I'm wondering if blue sometimes stands for justice. I'm making a connection to our learning about the U.S. flag. Anyway, so I just want you to be thinking about that as we enjoy this book. And there is a small person with a little dog looking up at Lincoln. And on the back, I see Lincoln's black stovepipe hat. Okay, here we go. Looking at Lincoln. Oh, and these are the words, some words from the Gettysburg Address, which is a famous speech that Lincoln delivered. Oh, and there is tall Abraham Lincoln. Looking at Lincoln by Maira, Kalman. Oh my gosh. Look at this very bright illustration to start us off. It looks like walking down the street in springtime, I think, like now. But the sidewalk is pink and some of the people are blue. Wow, it's just very different. Let's read. One day while walking through the park on my way to breakfast, I saw a very tall man. He reminded me of someone, but I could not think who. So I got to stop and think, because this isn't like a regular biography where someone is telling about the life of the person. This person is talking about things that are happening to them as they see someone who looks like Lincoln. Yes, it's a different way of telling about Lincoln. At the coffee shop, I ordered pancakes. They were delicious. We paid with a Lincoln and 2 Washingtons. Oh, like $5 plus $1 plus $1. That means their breakfast cost $7. And then I remembered the man I had seen looked exactly like Abraham Lincoln. So there's a bright, cheery breakfast with bright colors. It's kind of like a still life, you know, in art. When you draw a collection of items in a place, in one place, instead of kind of a zoom out big picture, it's kind of a zoom in just on some objects, a still life. And there's a Lincoln and 2 Washingtons, $7. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States. Who was he? I went to the library to find out. Abraham Lincoln was such an amazing man that there are over 16,000 books written about him. I wanted to read them all, but I got lost in photos of his unusual face. I stared at one. I could look at him forever. And there you can see the person who's telling the story in the library looking at a picture of Abraham Lincoln. And if you'll remember, we've seen a few photographs of him, and he sure did have a very interesting face. You could really stare at him for a while. Oh, I see a log cabin. I know I'm making a connection to our learning. That's a symbol for him. He was born in a small log cabin in Kentucky on February 12, 1809. The family was poor. Abe was a dreamer. He did not like to do chores. He loved to read. He was lucky. His stepmother loved him like crazy, and he adored her. She looks so stern, But she let him dream and read as much as he wanted. There's the log cabin. And there's a portrait. Remember, a portrait is a painting or photograph of a person. He went to school for only 1 year, but he was curious and taught himself many things. They had hardly any supplies, and of course no electricity. Abraham spent many hours reading by the fire's glow. We've seen that kind of illustration in other books where they show him having to read by the fire's glow. And this is an interesting picture. That's a painting of a famous piece of paper, actually, that Abraham Lincoln really wrote on. You can see it in the museum. And up here is some math, some subtraction. Here are some numbers about measurements, how to measure things. And he wrote a funny little thing here because he liked jokes. He liked writing funny things. Abraham Lincoln, his hand and pen, he will be good, but God knows when. Wait, he will be good, but God knows when. So it's like he's telling us that he knows he was a rascally kid, didn't always like to do his chores. Remember, it said that. One day he was kicked in the head by a mule. He slept for 2 days. Then he woke up and grew up and decided to be a lawyer. He did like to argue. He lived in Springfield, Illinois, and got a reputation, that means he became known as, a smart and honest man. They called him Honest Abe. There's the mule that kicked him, and here he is on the street corner in front of a cheery house in Springfield, meeting lots of people. He had a family that he loved very much. His wife, Mary, who was very short, and 4 sons. They laughed and had lots of friends and even ran around a little wild. I wonder if Mary and Abraham had nicknames for each other. Did she call him Linky? Did he call her Little Plumpy? Maybe. Abe worked hard and became interested in the government. He decided that he would run for president, and on March 4th, 1861, he was inaugurated President of the United States. It looks like they're having a lovely time around the table together. But I don't know, playing with a ball next to the dining room table. We have read, I'm making a connection to other books that said things were kind of wild at their house sometimes. On the day he was elected, I bet Mary made his favorite vanilla cake. But maybe he forgot to eat his slice. He was often too busy thinking to eat. Lincoln wore a very tall hat. With his hat on, he was 7 feet tall. He wrote many notes and stuffed them inside his hat. What was he thinking about? He was thinking about democracy, the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution created by the founders of this country. He was thinking about freedom and doing good for mankind. And maybe he was also thinking about getting a birthday present for his little son, maybe a whistle or pickup sticks. So there he is thinking very seriously. So it's kind of dark, the picture. And there it's kind of a bright, maybe still life close-up of a whistle, like a fun present for a child. What did he love? He loved his dog Fido. I think Fido was cross-eyed. I'm wondering if they're thinking that from the photograph of Fido from the other book. He loved apples. Cox Orange Pippins, White Pippins, Winesap, Benoni. He always had an apple on his desk. He loved music. He loved Mozart, especially his opera, The Magic Flute. There's Fido, there are the apples, and there's Mozart. But mostly he loved people, his family, of course, but all people. And he wanted them to live well. He loved justice and truth. The country was in trouble and headed for a war. After hundreds of years of slavery, people were saying enough. There were courageous people who fought for liberty, like Sojourner Truth, and Frederick Douglass, who had been a slave until he ran away to the north. Both of them met with Lincoln and spoke of the plight of slaves. A plight is like the difficult situation. The difficult situation, the plight of slaves. Lincoln hated slavery and wrote to a friend, "If slavery is not wrong, nothing is wrong. During his presidency, he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, the first official step toward freeing millions of slaves. So that's an illustration of slaves picking cotton in the field with an overseer. That's someone watching over them to make sure they do their work. It was a difficult time to be president. The southern states, the Confederacy, wanted their own country where slavery would be allowed. Lincoln said, no, we must stay one country. The northern states, the Union, believed that slavery should be abolished. That means not allowed. And so they went to war. In the museum, I saw the uniform of one of the first soldiers killed in the Civil War. Here is a bullet hole at the point of his heart. There were 14 brass buttons on the front of his tunic. One was shot away. 13 brass buttons remain. The soldier's name was Elmer Ephraim Ellsworth. Terrible things happen in a war. The Civil War ground on. Lincoln went to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, the site of a big battle. Thousands of soldiers were buried there, many with just a number on their grave. On that sad land, Lincoln gave one of history's greatest speeches, the Gettysburg Address. It was short, only 272 words, ending with, "Government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth." The war finally ended in 1865. Almost 1 million people had been killed or wounded. The North had won. The people had suffered greatly, but now it was time to rejoice and start to rebuild the country, with Lincoln leading the way. But it was not to be. After the agony of the war, Lincoln wanted to lighten the mood. He took his wife to see a funny play, but during the play he was shot, murdered by a wretched man who did not want slavery to end. Lincoln had been rocking in this chair. People carried him across the street to the home of a friend. He died the next morning, April 15th, 1865. He was 56 years old. The news spread. People across the land wept with grief. That means they were crying, crying with sadness for their fallen leader. But a great man is never really gone. Oh my goodness. Wow, after this picture, the dark picture, this makes me feel a little better. Abraham Lincoln will live forever, and if you go to Washington, D.C. in the spring, you can walk through the cherry blossoms and visit him. Yes, you could walk through the cherry blossoms and visit the Lincoln Memorial, but we're not supposed to do that right now. They've closed off the roads there to make sure that we maintain social distancing because we don't want to get each other sick. But in the future, and you can also probably look online and see this. At his memorial, you can read the words he wrote near the end of the war. With malice toward none, with charity for all. Malice means kind of meanness, and charity means to help others. So that was a big problem at the end of the war because the war had been so divisive, really dividing the North and the South, dividing families. Remember we talked about in Mr. Lincoln's Whiskers, in Grace Bedell's own family with all those brothers and sisters, they had different opinions. So what Lincoln said at the end of the war, some people in the North thought, well, we won, so we're going to show those Southerners what's what. But he said the way we have to heal is to not be angry towards each other, but to be charitable, to just help one another. I think we have to help each other right now too. Anyway, you can look into his beautiful eyes. Just look. And that is like the illustration from the cover. Oh, and that's just a little bit from the first illustration. So, when I look at this book, the thing that I'm going to do, because I've got to do something at the end of the book, the thing I've always loved about this book and what I really like in sharing it to you is how beautiful the artwork is. And we can learn so much about art, how there are close-ups that are like still lifes, close-ups that just show a few objects in one place. There are landscape. A landscape is when the picture is from far back. And also, because it's kind of modern, the illustrator author used different colors, I think, to send a mood, to create the mood in the pictures. So for example, in the picture where it's the funeral procession, or it's showing the horse, actually that makes me think of old Bob, Lincoln's favorite horse, the colors are really dark because it's sad. But then when the author is trying to help us have a positive thought about how we can remember the good things about Lincoln, she uses really bright, beautiful colors around the cherry blossoms. And there's another nice example of this too, also near the front here, when he's starting to get to know everybody in Springfield, Illinois, and it's like he's standing on the corner meeting all these nice people, and the colors are really bright and cheerful, like he's starting his life and making his reputation, getting to be known as a nice, friendly, helpful, honest person. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, looking at Lincoln, and that's it for today. Please be sure to, it's brightened up, get outside, get some fresh air, but keep your distance from others. Be sure to wash your hands, cover your coughs and sneezes, help your family around the house. Even though Lincoln says he didn't like chores, he sure worked hard, right? Just like we can all work hard to help our families. And be sure you do at least a little writing and a lot of reading. And I really miss you guys. Thank you so much. I've been getting more and more emails. People have been sending me some of their writing and their pictures. It's just great to hear from you. And I'll write back to every person who writes to me, and maybe in the next video I'll mention about some of the things that people are sending to me. Anyway, love you guys, miss you. Elbow bump.